Chapter 85th. How I Learned to Push Back. For 12 years I was silent. What that looked like I've already written. Skirts, massages, 12 days of silence, drinking to sleep with him when I didn't want to. 4 outbursts of anger in all those years. I won't repeat it. The body remembers. This is about how the silence began to end. How a fight used to work. He said something, and everything clenched inside. Not necessarily a scream, sometimes a contemptuous look, sometimes words that individually are normal, but in the context of 12 years hit the same place grandmother hit, not the stomach, the dignity. And the autopilot switched on. Go silent, swallow, don't show, and then hot makeup, quickly. Reset the conflict to preserve contact, not because I thought I was wrong, because being cut off was scarier than any injustice. He lived with a woman who doesn't get offended and doesn't ask for help, care, and support. He thought so for 12 years, and I was stockpiling, like grandmother, only I didn't explode. I drank, and one day stood on the balcony of the 17th floor. January 2026, the fight that changed everything. Vanya called at noon. Started with a complaint. I promised to come by 12 and would be 2 hours late due to circumstances I had communicated. You promised and aren't keeping your word. Anxiety switched on immediately. Familiar, bodily, I'm unreliable. I don't keep my word. I'm wrong again. Then, without pause, he moved to an example. Told me about friends. They want a divorce because you can't rely on a person because of their ADHD. For him, it was someone else's story, an abstract example, not about us. But I was already inside the anxiety. The body was already on guard. And when right after, you don't keep your word, came, you can't rely on a person, the body connected the dots before the head. Not because I'm paranoid. Because 12 years of criticism taught me to hear judgment where it hasn't been spoken yet. I interrupted. Said I hear this as a continuation, that first I was accused of unreliability, then the accusation was reinforced with a story where people divorce over it. You made up a dialogue in your head that didn't happen, he said. You got offended by words I didn't even say. He wanted one thing, for me to admit I'd misunderstood, that his example had nothing to do with me, that the problem was my interpretation, not how he started the conversation. I wrote him a letter, detailed, explained. I didn't react to his intention, I reacted to the context, to the complaint that started the conversation, to the anxiety it triggered, to 12 years during which the body learned to expect judgment in every conversation. I didn't make up a dialogue. I lived the context he set, and it hurt. He didn't accept a single explanation. The formula remained. You distorted, you imagined, the problem is you. On the phone he added, you have an imaginary person in your head. It's possibly a consequence of your ADHD. I can't guess what's in your head. You have an imaginary person in your head. This is possibly a consequence of your ADHD. I can't guess what's going on inside you. That is, instead of, I see my words hurt you, you have a perception defect. Instead of, let's figure out what happened. You made it up. My pain was reclassified as my malfunction. We were arguing about what counts as reality. For him, reality was his intention and his words. For me, my reaction and my body. He said one thing, I heard another, and instead of trying to understand why I heard it that way, he insisted I heard it wrong. I showed my anger on the phone. He reacted by saying, you're mean. Hung up. Don't come. Before, I would have given in, apologized for being offended, swallowed it. This time I wrote another letter. Not hysterical, long, numbered, 10 patterns of our interaction, each with a mechanism, examples, and a description of what it does to me. Context is excluded. Only his words and his intention are recognized as reality. My explanations don't change his position, no matter how many times I explain. My labor is devalued. Where's the result? Nothing is changing. Prove it. My emotions are allowed only when convenient. Anger. You're mean. Phone hung up. I wrote not out of revenge. I wrote because, for the first time in my life, I had language for what was happening. A CA gave me that language, and I could name the mechanism with precise words, not with screaming and not with silence. I lay down and fell asleep. Calmly, without ruminating, without the usual horror that contact was severed and the world collapsed. The body responded with relief. Anger came out in words, and then afterward it got quieter, not louder. He called back, apologized, offered to make up. Before I would have rushed in, reset everything just so he'd talk to me again. This time I didn't rush. Said, but inside held one thing. Without acknowledging what happened, reconciliation is just another devaluation. We started talking, slowly, like two people who'd spent 12 years communicating in different languages. He started hearing, not my arguments, but my pain. Started asking, did I upset you? He hadn't asked before, because he didn't know I got upset. Now he knew. March, Friday, 2026. Called Vanya, just wanted to be together. Suggested going to a restaurant or buying shrimp and cooking together. He answered, sorry, you're not my focus of attention. You're calling short notice. Not, I'm busy, let's do tomorrow. But you're not my focus of attention, like a task that was postponed. I invited my husband to spend the evening together, and was told I'm not a priority. The body heard the familiar. Before this would have triggered the chain. Critic, of course, who needs you? Surrenderer, pointless. Binge eater, open the fridge. It didn't trigger. Not because I suddenly became strong, but because that morning I'd breathed 2 hours. The body was in a different state, not survival mode, but slightly below, slightly softer. And when the familiar chain tried to start, I managed to notice it before it picked up speed. I cooked myself dinner, arranged it beautifully on a plate, as I'd never done before, because before, food was a task, not a pleasure. Promised myself I'd draw, went to work on the book. A plate instead of a pit, a small choice, but mine. Sunday, 2 days later, Artem's Day. We were making a celebration for him, the three of us. At the table I shared with Vanya a dream, something I'd been carrying for months and hadn't told anyone aloud. I said, I want my book to be recommended in every AA group. Not from vanity, from a conviction that had grown over the past year. I'd attended AA meetings. People there walked in for 30 years saying, I'm an alcoholic. 30 years of repenting. And it's true. They're alcoholics. But it's not the whole truth. Because almost all of them grew up in the same houses as me. They treated alcohol, the symptom, and the root, childhood, remained untouched. No one asked why the person started drinking. No one taught loving parent. No one explained why meditation works at the level of the nervous system. Not because God. For those who lost faith, for the thorough, for the analytical, AA had no tools. I wanted to provide them. He straightened an invisible crown on his head and said, "Crown not too tight?" First I couldn't respond. A lump, clenching, the same mechanism as with grandmother. When it hurts, go silent. But this time between "it hurts" and "go silent," a gap appeared. A second, maybe two. Into that gap I inserted words. You devalued the thing most precious to me. I've been carrying this book. I haven't left the house. And you, crown. He, what, you've never been offended before? Always offended. Just held it in. He, I didn't know you were like that. Well, I am. And when I joke about myself, that's my right. Russians can joke about Russians, but Americans about Russians, no. When you joke about me at the moment I trust you with the most precious thing, that's not a joke. That's devaluation. I said this calmly, looking him in the eyes, in the voice I hadn't had for 40 years. He didn't leave, didn't go silent, stood and listened, then, not right away, apologized. For there was nothing to apologize for, not because he didn't offend, but because I didn't show that I was offended. He lived with a woman who endures, and I with a man to whom I couldn't show pain, because if I did, he'd leave. I was always afraid of that. Nobody left. On Friday, I handled myself. Didn't fall into the pit after "you're not in my focus," a plate, the book. On Sunday, I handled him, said, "Well, I am," and didn't apologize for it. Between those 2 days, between the girl who for 40 years swallowed every devaluation and the woman who looked him in the eyes and named things by their names, a whole life, the program, the steps, the cat, the breathing, the dictaphone, notes on the fridge, and one skill I'm learning again at 41, to say that it hurts. Vanya is relearning. Started asking, started noticing, started apologizing, clumsily, like a person who was also never taught. I'm relearning to push back, not with a fist and not with silence, with words, quiet, precise. We are both without a model, both from houses where love looked like work and tenderness like weakness. We didn't read a CA books, didn't attend meetings, didn't meditate with Dispenza. He had no map, no language for what was happening to us, and still he was changing, without tools, without a therapist, simply because I finally told the truth, and he heard it. For a person without a map, that's courage. I still live separately, want to return on every day, but I need more time to get used to the fact that Artem doesn't scream, and Vanya is beginning to see me as a woman, not a function. This is not a happy ending. This is an honest beginning, or an honest ending. I don't know which yet. I said, I don't want a dialogue where everything is my fault. I didn't know whether it would work, didn't know whether he'd leave, didn't know whether this was the end of the marriage. But I said it and didn't take it back. That is how it works. It doesn't look like a movie scene. It looks like a text message at 2 a.m. that you rewrite 17 times and then send anyway. Vanya read. Called the next day, said, I hear you. Didn't say sorry, didn't say I was wrong. Said, I hear you. For him that was a lot, for me it was enough. I'm relearning, pushing back, not with a fist and not with silence, with words, with presence, with the willingness to say, this hurts me, and not run away from the fact that it hurts. We are both without a model, both from houses where love looked like war. Both had to learn from scratch how to fight and stay close, how to be angry and not destroy, how to say this hurts and not expect a blow in return. He didn't read ACA books, didn't go to meetings, didn't meditate. His way of changing was different, slower, quieter, less visible. But he changed. Not how I wanted, how he could. I still live separately. Want to come back every day. But I need more time, more silence, more getting used to the fact that I can say this hurts and not be thrown out for it. This is not a happy ending. This is an honest beginning, or an honest end. I don't know yet. I just know that for the first time in 12 years, both of us are trying, clumsily, with setbacks, with the old patterns still firing, but trying.